Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live coding session here in the tech capital of the world, Kernersville, North Carolina. Kevin, how you doing today?
Good. This is where all the best live coding sessions come from, I've heard. That's the rumor on the internet.
That's it. Yeah, we're not biased at all. So,
Not at all.
so we've been working on. I'm just going to jump into it. We've been working on this app, Obscura, which we think is a really cool kind of movie game app. And I'll show you kind of where we were. See if I can get this in here. And we had these squares that are kind of like obscured, hence the name Obscura. And if you type a guess in here, which the guess doesn't work yet, we'll get there. And then it would reveal another square, and then you could guess again, and then you could guess again, then you could guess, and you keep guessing until you can know what the movie is, right? And you can see here, we've got a little hints are going to go in here. We're going to keep track of our guesses here. We haven't done that yet. And then we're going to have like a win and loss condition. So you only get 5 guesses. And so there's 12 squares on this. And if you refresh it, it starts over with another random square. So we're pulling a random square off these 12 squares. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, one of the things we ran into last week was I have this like cool background and it doesn't show up. So let's fix that right off the bat. And it's one of those things about doing something live, Kevin.
It's one of those you notice, like, we literally got off stream and you were like, oh, I'm so dumb. Like,
I'm an idiot.
But not at all, because it's one of those things that's like, oh, that's obvious. But at the time when you're working through something, it's not always that way, is it?
When I show you what I did, you're going to go, a lot of you guys are programming like, yeah, you should have known that. And what's even funnier is, every cohort that we do at Coder Foundry here, the beginning, the first freaking day, we go over this particular point. Like we drill it home. Like if you don't do this, it's going to mess you up.
Yeah.
And
see, you were thinking this was more of a. You thought it was more of a technical problem than it was, and I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? When you become, but when you become more advanced. The easier things do slip.
Become more advanced.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly my point. You were looking for like all these very technical, like very problematic things, and it's like one of these. No, it's a back to basics thing, which happens.
Yeah, it's a back to basics. So let me show you kind of what it is, and you guys can laugh along with me. So in general, in a Blazor app, we have these basic components here, and the first one is we have this app razor that holds all of our base page. So everything runs in a single page architecture, so SPA. And you can see here, I'm loading in style sheets, and I have my app.css here and my themes.css, and they're at the top of this head tag here. And then I'm loading in some fonts, and then I'll load in Bootstrap. And so I'm letting and what the thing you have to know is that as these get delivered, the last style sheet loaded takes priority. And so if you want your custom styles to be in priority, they have to be loaded last. All right. And this holds true for your inline styles or your computed styles here for your isolate style sheets and anything else. So if I move this down below Bootstrap here, which is where it should have been, and then I'll put a comment here, custom styles.
So basically Bootstrap styles were overriding your custom style, right?
Yeah, so what Bootstrap does is set a white background by default.
Yeah.
And so my image was being set, but the background white was being loaded in after it was set. And so it would just made it white, and I couldn't change it. So my image was, that's why when we looked at it, we're like, dude, that image is there. Like,
it's there. Right. When you inspected the CSS, it showed, right? It was there.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all working. The other thing too that I did want to mention here, that I did read about this because .NET 9 is fairly new, because I've been doing a lot of .NET 8 lately, so I haven't seen this as much. This is one of the new things they're doing, is that these style sheets will get generated at compile time with a special, I guess like a GUID or an identifier on the style sheet itself, so that it's unique. So that's another enhancement they've made.
Is that like a security thing then or something?
It's so that you can't step on style sheets with the same name.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So they'll get loaded in, and they'll have a little tag. I'll show you that when we run it.
I got a question for you, by the way.
What's that?
Joseph was asking if we're using C#, and we are, but there was another question too. Joseph wanted to know, what project template did you use?
Okay, that was from last week. You can go watch last week, but we used the basic web app template from the get-go, from C# for Blazor.
Yeah, we didn't really have a custom template or anything. It was the bog standard, just start a new project.
Yeah. If you come to Coder Foundry or you get to our soon-to-be released Blazor course, we talk about creating our own custom templates, and that's something that we do. So that all your branding and everything kind of can be in the tank, and you can have a really good starting point for the common things that you do all the time, like set a footer, set a header, maybe a common database like Postgres or something like that. You want it all hooked up. So we do that kind of stuff in the cohort. Here, I didn't do that because if you were coding along, you wouldn't have it. So it'd be too much magic at that point. So I just used the standard web app template. All right, so I think if this doesn't show here, now we can go look at this app CSS and look at it here. And so we've got my before tag in my body, and then I've got a body tag here. And I'm also, let's just run it, see what it does. It should show up here at this point. If it doesn't, we'll stop it and start it. Let's just try it, because those style sheets need to be recompiled. Okay, we're good. We're still good though, Kevin.
Okay.
There's some other things we got to do because I gave up on doing it. I'll just make sure. All right, so we're still fine. So like one of the things that we do have to ensure is that we set the Z index for this too.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah. Because remember, you dropped some stuff off this and manipulated it to try and fix it. And yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so we got to set the Z index for it. I'm gonna go ahead and put top. This is just position it, and left. It's just where I want this particular image. And then we got probably one more improvement here. Still not showing up. All right.
I thought I saw it for a second there, though. Did I not when it first loaded? Maybe that was just me.
Yeah. There we go.
Hey, there we go. Cool.
So now we have a black background here. Well, our image isn't in there yet, so maybe our image isn't. Let's make sure that this is spelled right, all that kind of stuff. Images, and what did we call it now? Plain background. Images URL. So no repeat cover, center. We're going to blur this thing. Before, background none. And then we got a height here. And I'm going to, I know that I need to do this, so I'm just going to go do it right now. I do want the background color to be black because it feels around the edges of the image. So,
all right.
Let's run it one more time here and see if it works. And we'll go check this to make sure that this is right. I think that's right. My image isn't showing up yet, but it is black. All right, let's inspect the page here and see what else could be going on here. I'm going to check my header tag to see if everything is loaded in the way I want, which it is. So you can see here that that app is renamed, that style sheet. It's got a computed name on it. It's kind of cool. Same thing with the Obscura Live. These are the compiled style sheets that come in from isolated styles. All right, so we can look at our background here. Okay, it should be showing up here.
Let's move on. Don't worry about it.
Then we got to go move on.
We'll come back.
That's grayed out. All right. We got it black though, so at least we have that. We'll work on it. All right, so now we can work on showing the API. So like there's a couple of things that we need to talk about before we do this is like inside of Blazor, there's things called render modes. And this is what sets Blazor apart from the other ones, but also adds a little bit of layer of complexity to achieve this. And so we're going to use several render modes to do this. And render modes are how the page gets rendered. And I've got a short like kind of thing here that I think that'll help us do this. So let me just see if we can do this real quick and just talk a little bit about render modes. Otherwise, when I start doing this, you may not understand what I'm trying to do. It may look overly complicated and you're like, why are you doing all this so much easier other ways? All right, so basically what Blazor is a web application framework, and it's built so that we can build interactive web pages. So when we're talking about interactive web pages, we're talking about things like JavaScript that manipulates the DOM in place, and we don't have to refresh the entire page. So React or Angular and now Blazor are the primary frameworks that allow us to do this. And so, but with Blazor, we don't have to write any, as you'll see here, I'm not writing any JavaScript whatsoever to manipulate the DOM. But how they do that is kind of important. And so there's basically 5 types of render modes inside of Blazor. And one's called enhanced navigation, which is really cool in that if you make just a server-side page, just a random HTML page, but you have a layout component like we put together and a footer component, when that page gets refreshed, it'll keep the footer and the header components together and it just will refresh the changes. And that's called enhanced navigation. It looks like it's been implemented by JavaScript, but it's not. The server is figuring out like, okay, what do I currently have rendered? What are the deltas, and kind of push those together and then send just the changes out to the app and then patch it in. So it's kind of really, really slick when you're building just a purely server-side app. But then there's server-side rendered, which is the same kind of thing. These server-side rendered and enhanced navigation kind of go hand in hand. And you got streaming, and then we're going to use server, signal, and WASM. Let me show you what those are. And so kind of how that works. All right, we talked a little about enhanced navigation. So server-side rendered is up until recently, ASP.NET, Blazor. Before pre-Blazor, you had things like MVC, web pages, ASP.NET, and you would send a request to a page and it would send you a page back. So you'd say, hey, I want to see the index page, and it sends you back the entire page, and that's called server-side render. That's kind of how the web has kind of worked since the invention of the web. And that's just your basic server-side. The reason we went away from this is because back in 2000-ish, 1999, people were using, remember this thing called dial-up, Kevin? They would use dial-up, and these page requests would take a minute to run. And so we don't want that. We want this to come back real instantly. So that's when JavaScript came around and said, what if we just sent you the deltas or the changes? And that rose to prominence of what we see today, is that we can see an interactive page that's only updating what it needs to. So we also have this thing called streaming rendering, which kind of the same thing in that we can render part of the page and have placeholder content. You've probably seen this where I'm going to load an image, but I have a placeholder image that has loading on it. And then that will show until the request is completed in the background, and then it'll patch in the difference. So this isn't used as much inside of Blazor at large, but it is part of the package. What people are doing is this. They are using Signal R. And what happens here is we send a request to, say, this page that we've been looking at here, and then it'll come back. And what it'll do is establish a WebSocket connection between the page itself and the server. And then if there's any changes requested to that page, the server will create those changes, send the deltas down, and just update the DOM in place. And that all happens on the server. But there's some downsides to that. So we have to have this thing called a SignalR connection, all right? And that SignalR connection is kind of expensive. It also disconnects when it, after a while, so you can time the page out. Now, what I will say in .NET 9 and .NET 10, .NET 9's out now, is that they've made this SignalR reconnection a lot better. But before, that was a big downside. It just reconnect. You'd have to hit refresh to get the page really reconnected, and that was kind of bad. However, it would start up blazingly quick, and that's why people liked it. So in order to combat that, there's also WebAssembly mode, and WASM means that we run this entirely in WebAssembly, and we send a request back, and it sends a response back, and it has the entire .NET runtime and the WebAssembly runtime on the page, so it can run C# code in the browser. And then when I need to communicate to the server, I have to do that over HTTP. Just the way that React or Angular applications work, I have to call over HTTP to the server to get some JSON back, and then I can take that JSON, because it's running WebAssembly, and run my server-side code in the browser, communicate and make changes happen on the client. And this works and behaves and looks like just your standard kind of React or Angular app. And so an Angular app pretty much is always communicating through HTTP on the back end. Same thing with WebAssembly. However, the problem is this takes a minute to start up. And I would say not a minute, a literal minute, but it takes a few seconds for it to start up. So the page startup time is higher than you would get from a traditional kind of React application or even the server-side rendered app. And now what I would say, in development, this looks slow. In production in real life, it's not as slow as you think, but it's a concern. And so what do? Well, you enter in auto mode, and then auto mode allows us to make a request to the server for the page, and then it can send back. Now, in the background on the first request, it'll download WebAssembly in the background. And then when it can switch over, it will over to HTTP without the user knowing. And so, however, this is a problem because a server-side component communicates differently than a WebAssembly component. And so you can't make your server-side component, or you don't want to, communicate over HTTP since sitting on the server. So we need a way to get auto modes to work. And this is one of the things I would say that here at Coder Foundry that we've kind of put together our own architecture to do this. And so that we can service auto mode components that need to run on the server. It's easy to make an auto mode component that doesn't need to run on the server at all. And it's just a purely front end. You can just set it to auto and it'll just work. But the moment you need a database, you need to check some kind of auth, you need to call what we're going to call an API endpoint. It's got to communicate in WebAssembly over HTTP. Your interactive server component doesn't do it that way. So you end up, a lot of people are writing it two ways. We don't want to do that. We want to service one code. So here's our kind of our what we call BDAP, which is Blazor Data Access. Now we're using part of this in this app here. So when our app starts up, we will get a SignalR connection. That is the default mode that will run first. And that's the fastest one. And it's going to call a service that we're going to write today called getRandomMovie. And this service runs on the server, and then getRandomMovie will in turn call the movie DP API and send us back some JSON. And then over that SignalR connection, we'll update our page. At the same time that this is happening, WebAssembly is being downloaded in the background over this connection. The next time you refresh the page, and so you can see this whole thing here, WebAssembly will start up the next time we request the page. And this time we are going to send a request to an HTTP controller, a web API controller that will write, which in turn call our service, which then will in turn call the movie API, send us back the result and communicate back. Now notice the payload's different and everything is different about how these two pages, which is the same page, behave depending on render mode. And so what we're going to do is write a service method that can communicate in both modes. And so this service method will operate the same no matter how it's called, but this intermediate step here, this web API controller, will allow us to call this, because our web UI controller is on the server, we can call this from here, and then this can translate it and send it back over HTTP to this client. But this is different code, different types of code that runs here and different types of code that runs here, but this is the same page. So what do? We're going to use something called dependency injection to inject a different service method for each side. And because the interface is the same, it'll just work. All right. And I'll get into this more when we do it. All right. So let's see if we can make something happen. See if we can do this. All right. So let's stop this right here and let's get into our code here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a service method in our server project. Okay. Now each service method that we need also needs an interface. All right. Since we're going to use the same interface on the server side project and on the client side project, we'll create our interface down here. So we'll come down here and we'll create a brand new folder here, and we're going to call this services. So add new folder, services. And this is just kind of the folder structure that we've put together. Now here's what's interesting and of note of why this works is that at runtime and at compile time, this server project can see the files in the client project, but the client project cannot see files in the server project. All right. And that's because this will potentially be running in WebAssembly in a sandbox and it doesn't have access to the server. All right. Okay. So what I was doing was, I'm going to get rid of this. Delete here. We'll delete it and start over. So what I was talking about is we haven't really done anything yet. So if you saw the presentation on like different modes or whatever. Did you see that part, Kevin?
Yeah, we saw the presentation. Yeah, you just started, you created the new folder and that was as far as we got.
Okay. So what we need to do is create an interface for our service. Okay. And our interface is just basically the blueprint for the functions that we're going to write. And on each server project and client project, we're going to have different types of methods. But since we use the same interface, it'll work in both places. If we want an interface visible to the server and the client project, it must be put into the client project because the server project can see the client side, but the client side can't see the server side. And that's because this client server project will be running in WebAssembly, and that has no visibility to the server whatsoever. So we can't write the same code in one place unless we use an interface and use a different service method each one. So we're going to write code in each side, but we're going to use the interface to make them look the same so that when we call our service method from this page, it'll figure out which one to call based on where it's running. But, so we'll get into that in a second. So I'm going to add a new interface here. And we use a name convention. It just starts with I. And TMDB service. So this is an interface. So the interface doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any implementation here. And let's see, Control KD. All right. And we're going to write our first method. Now we'll come back and ask, we'll write a bunch of methods here, but we're going to start with one. Okay. So now we need models here as well. So we're going to have to get these first before we even write this. I forgot about that. So let's stop here. So our methods will return a movie model. So I'm gonna go over here and if you're looking at the TMDB API, we go to API reference here. We're going to go over and look at the discover endpoint here. And I've got my access code token in here. So if I type in just anything here, so we can try it and see who it returns. You can see here it's going to return this JSON data, and this is the model that we want here. And so this model here is what we want. We're going to call this the movie model. So we've got to create these. And so you could either way look at this model and type each one in, stuff like that, or can just collapse. I think you can collapse it from here. If not, we'll just copy it. Control C. So I'm copying this right out of the endpoint. And you can do this with any API. And I'll show you a trick here that we do all the time. So I'm going to create another folder here called add new folder models. And models, to be type safe, are the objects that we can pass around, and they're in a known format. So if we know that they're in this format, we know it'll work everywhere we need to do. Okay. So I'm going to say right click. I'm going to add a new class. I'm going to call this movie. And from here, what I can do is I can paste special. So this will paste special JSON as classes, and it's going to create this stuff for me. So I don't have to type all this stuff in. I'm going to need to modify this a lot, get this to work. But for the most part, this is all we need. All right. So I'm going to get rid of this root object. I'll explain that a little bit because we're never going to look at this whole thing here. We just want this class here, and we're going to rename this class to movie. Now, even though it's called result in the JSON coming in, it's matching up on the names here. So it'll like fill it in. However, there are some naming conventions for classes that we need to adjust, and then we'll make sure that our endpoints knows what our naming convention is. And so we're going to change this over to remove the underscores and then change it to be snake casing. All right, just like that. Now, every string that we have here, we're going to mark as nullable. Just like that. So I'm going to have to go through these real quick and change these. It's just, unfortunately, it's just the way the world is. You got to change stuff, get it named right. This will take a minute, Kevin. I'll take questions while I'm doing this, if there's any.
You got no questions. It's gonna keep on.
All right. So basically, these are naming conventions that we need to have here for each type here. And I'm going to make sure that these can be nullable. All right. And then one underscores, and we want fixed name of poster path. And I'll go through each of these names here. So adult means, do we want adult movies back? Yes or no? We're going to say no. Backdrops, there's a lot of images coming back from these APIs. And then we have genres, where genres then the ID, the original language, original title, overview, which we'll use. And then the populator. This poster path is where we're going to grab this right here and get this is the image that we want to show in our app. And release date is when the movie was released, obviously.
These are some of the details you're going to use for the clues too, right? That's why you're pulling all this back.
Some of it, and then we're actually going to call a different endpoint to get more stuff that we can make more clues. Yeah.
Okay.
So we can get more information from it. And there's also where you can get the trailers or any kind of videos. Now we're also going to use this vote average as well too, and vote count. So we've looked at this data quite a bit, and one of the things that we're going to do here is we're going to say, if you don't have a vote count of over 200, we don't think you're popular enough to be an Obscura, our app.
Okay. So you're just trying to pull off the more popular movies and make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want a random movie that two people in the world have seen. That's not fun.
Right.
So the fun part is guessing popular movie posters, or at least popular movie posters.
Although maybe a future enhancement, we can have a really difficult mode where your vote count is less than 100 and you make it just really difficult obscure movies. I could see that being a feature.
It's like,
go to super difficult
a lot
mode.
of times these movies haven't been released, or they never got a release.
Yeah, but could you imagine like super difficult mode? It's like or impossible mode. We could have that as a feature.
Impossible mode.
Impossible mode, where the vote counts less than 100. It'd be amazing. I want to play that one. I want to play that version. See if I can get just one.
The only person that knows about some of these movies is the guy that made it. So,
exactly, the guy that made it. I was like, I was in that movie.
Yeah, and there's also some really weird, like, because it is user generated content, and there are people that put fake movies in this, and you can find them. Okay. And they're just funny.
Okay.
They'll make like a random trailer of them running through their house or something like that. It's like, I saw once called the movie Chris or something like that. It's just like, it's like, how did this get in here? It's clearly,
that's funny.
But so you'll see stuff like that. All right, so we've got a movie class now. Okay, so we're going to actually add this also to our endpoints here. And so let's see. This will clear up once we get a file in there that we can save. All right, so, and let's see, client dot model should be models. Hopefully that's right. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so it's going to be underscore, I think. Let me look at these imports again. Okay, we need to change this. So this tells us where it's located, so we need to do underscore here. Hindsight 2020, I shouldn't have named this. This is a problem. And I would go back and rename this, but we're going to leave it alone now. Hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me. So I should have just not put a dash in it. Okay, let's see here. Right. And then let's go to our models here. Not a big deal. All right, and so now in imports here, we should, yep. So now we have services, our models are all loaded in here. That's good. All right, so now we can write our interface here. So now that we have a model here, and again, I want to stress that these models, because it's in the client project, this server project can see them. So that's important to note. All right. And that's why we put them down here. As we move in, if you take our course, as we move into more complicated apps, sometimes we have DTO models and we have root models and DTO models. So, but here we only have one model, so it's okay. All right, so let's write our interface. So this is going to be task movie. It's the type here, and it's going to, let's see here. I want to put that in the import statement. Let me see here. If it doesn't see it, save everything. We'll just put a using statement in here. All right. So we're going to write a just an interface. An interface says, what is the signature of this? It's nothing more important than that. There's no implementation. So if you ever wondered what's the difference between a class and an interface, interface is the signature method with no implementation. And you'll see why this is important in a second. Now, I do know a couple of things about this that we're going to want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add these. Okay. And so we're going to add in, we want to sort by year, start and end. Okay. Because eventually we want to know what start we want to send it in, what decade maybe, when do we start, when do we end, so that the customer can modify that if they want. And then we're also going to allow them to look in genres eventually. So we'll look at genres. All right. So this is going to, this signature method here is going to say, get a random movie. and pass in 3 variables or 3 parameters: year start, year end, and genres. Pretty simple. And then what we come in is, then we need to write a service method that implements this interface. Okay, so we'll come up here and we'll write the server side first because it's the most, it's the one that will start up first when we start a project, unless we specify this being a specific render mode. So we're gonna interactive server first because it's the quickest startup. And I would say that when you're writing code and you're doing this in development, interactive server is good for development, and switch it over to auto when you go into production. So I need to write a service method now. So I'm going to come to my live project here, or my server project. I'm going to add a new folder, and we're going to call it services as well. Boom. Okay. And in here, I'm going to write the implementation of this interface here. So I'm going to write the actual code to make this work. And then we inject the interface around, and then it implements the correct service layer. All right. So I'm coming here, I'm going to write a new class here, and I'm just going to call this TMDB service, TMDB service. Just like that. This is going to be the death of me every time here. Okay. So now what we can do is, this service needs to communicate over HTTP. It also needs to implement our interface. So I'm going to implement our interface here. And if I can't see it, I'll probably add a using statement. I can't. So I'm going to add a using statement here in components, imports here. And I'm going to add using client services here. So I'm looking at the client project here, services. And then I'll come over here, and now I'll be able to implement my interface. And it's going to be called TMDB. Boom. It's like that. Now it'll throw an error at first, and you come over here and you can say implement interface, and it'll put the signature in there with a method for us to write our code. Kind of cool, right? And so this means that we always, since we implement interface, we always have to implement the signatures that are in the interface, which makes our service layers always more correct, because it won't compile unless you've implemented all of these interfaces. So you can't forget what to do. You have to implement all the interfaces, or you can just throw an error here that says not implemented exception, which is what we have here. So that means if we called this from our code, it would throw an error currently. All right. Now there's a couple things else we need to do, because I do know that we're going to call over to HTTP to do this. So I need to bring in HTTP into this service layer here. So I'm going to create a private variable. And this is an HTTP client. We'll just use HTTP for short. And this allows us to do things. If you're coming here from JavaScript, things like fetch, this does kind of the same thing. We're going to call a endpoint over HTTP, and we use this built-in method here inside of .NET to do it, instead of something like a fetch library you would in JavaScript. It does essentially the same thing.
I got a question for you too, by the way, before you carry on. I got a question real quick. John wants to know, are you thinking about publishing this app towards the end? And if so, will it be on Railway, Azure? Where we publish?
We're going to publish it to Railway.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll get to that, and so that someone can run with it and play with it. Cool. And actually, you know what we'll do? Today we'll set it up to publish so that you can start seeing kind of what the problems are with publishing. Because I'm getting a random movie, I know I'm going to be using that. I'm going to declare a random generator here. And this is declared outside of the methods it's going to be used. And you could read about this, but this is so that this thing is more random. if you declare this inside of a method, it tends to repeat the same seed. And so it skews to doing the same thing over and over again, which defeats the purpose. It's not truly random. This makes it more randomized in that the seed right here is going to be created out here. And so it keeps track of, oh, that was the last random number I did. So like I'm going to generate another different random number. So it's different. It's better to declare these outside of the methods and when you're calling them. But you could Google that if you want to. The other thing that I need to do is, remember when we renamed all those methods, okay? And now we have different names in our model and different names in JSON. But since we used a naming convention to do that, we're going to write a quick method here to allow us to do that, to translate between the two naming conventions. And this is kind of important to do because you want to name your things correctly inside C#, but you may not know what they are coming back from any kind of endpoint. So I'm going to create this one method here, and you can see it's Copilot is telling me stuff I don't need. So this is a JSON serialization options. And then in here, what I want to do is I'm going to give it a property name policy. And that's going to be JSON naming policy. And what we do here is snake case lower. Is that what's in here? What? I don't know why it's not doing that. Okay. Serialization options. This must have changed. All right. So let me look here. Let's see. Property naming policy. I must have spelled that wrong.
Yeah, you just had name instead of naming.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now we have this naming policy. So what it'll do is when I get the JSON back from TMDB API, and then it's trying to import it into this movie, it'll rename them and say, oh, everything starts with the uppercase and it's uppercase lower until it says another word. And then it'll translate into this naming convention, because when you come about JSON, it has to be an exact match. It doesn't there's no fuzzy matching or anything like that. And we want to name our class this way. That's the proper name convention inside of C#. So this helps us translate that, and you don't have to do it yourself. Pretty cool. All right. So that's just one thing that we do here that makes it a little bit easier on us when we're trying to name things. All right. Now, this is grayed out. Once we start using these will turn white. So it's just saying right now that we haven't done anything here yet. All right. Now, there's one other thing that we want to do before we start writing this is that we're going to write a constructor, and the constructor is when this service starts up, we want to inject an HTTP client inside of here. And so it's going to be, this gets injected from our system at large. Okay. And so when the program starts up, this service gets created. .NET will inject HTTP in here so that we can call it and make it available to us. In addition to that, because someone asked, let's add a configuration in here so that we could figure out where to get our key from, whether in production or in development. Okay, so we're not going to hard code our key in here. We'll get our key from a store and our API key for TMDB API. So we'll inject that in there so that we could use that as well. Okay. So let's just do that. So I'm going to create a a constant here and string, and we'll call this config key equals, and I'm just going to give it a name here, and then I'm going to add it, tmdb API key. Now, what I'm getting ready to do here, this is the whole reason we're writing a server-side method for this, is because we do not want in our code base, either in GitHub when we push it, or if someone could look at our code, that they could see this key, because we want to keep that behind the scenes and secret, right? That way they could just use our key, run up our bill if we're paying for this. And so we don't want that to happen.
That's the important part, isn't it? For a lot of APIs that are paid, and they're just run up your bill. This one's a free one, doesn't really matter, but the ones that are...
So imagine that you're paying for a stock trading API for your stock trading app, right? And someone steals that API key, and then they just run your bill up, okay? Just to be mean. You know, or they could run your the request and hit your request limit on your TMDB API and cause your app not to work. So you don't want that to happen. So this is the whole reason we're writing a server-side backend, is so that I can hide this key. So over here inside my server project, I'm going to go ahead and add my key here. So I'm going to say add or manage user secrets. And I'm going to go grab my key. You may see part of it, but don't get too excited. I'm just going to pull it over here. This really isn't that important, or where the key comes from, but you'll just need one. So from here, and what did I call it? I called it API key. I think I called it API key.
Yeah, TMDB.
These do have to match. Yeah, I think I called it that. We'll go check it. Let's see here. All right, and then I'll go to secrets here and make sure those are the same. Okay. So this is the read access key I have. It's really, really long key. You have to go to TMDB API to go grab one if you want to make this work, because even when I push this to GitHub, this won't ride along with me, because user secrets are stored locally on the machine. And so when you pull this down from GitHub, you have to get your own key. However, our code will look for it. So come over here. It's going to grab this out of the config here. We're going to grab this config key and we're going to look for it here. I'll show you how that works here in a second. Okay, so this is the name of the key we're looking for. And then I'm going to go grab it out of that secrets folder. And it does this automatically, which is kind of cool. TMDB key equals, and it's config key. All right, so config uses this configuration coming in, and then we're passing in what are we looking for. And that's kind of what we're doing. In the same breath, I can write another one right here, which is called prod key, and then this says environment, get environment variable, look at the config key. So I'm going to name this, when I publish to Railway, the same thing, and it's going to look here and look here. Here's what you need to know. If I'm running up in Railway, this will come back null. If I'm running in development, this line will come back null. There's no environment variable inside of my, here where I'm running VS Code or Visual Studio. And then when I'm running inside of Railway, there's no user secrets to go look at. All right, so this will come back null. All right, so we'll have two keys here, and then we can just write a real simple check here. And so we'll make it a little bit better now. Let's do it better. So you say string is null or empty dev key. So if the dev key is null or empty, return the prod key, else return the dev key. So that's just all that's doing. All right. Should work just fine. Now, what we need to do next is we need to set up our HTTP call. So we're getting ready to call over to the TMDB API. And so we need to make sure we have a key. So I'm going to say if string is null or empty TMDB API key. All right. So what we can do here is change this to a not. All right. So this means that this key here, TMDB, let's make sure that's spelled right. We don't want it to propagate our misspellings. All right. So this means that this found something. This is what this line is. We found this TMDB key here, and now we want to set up our HTTP endpoints. So HTTP, and we're going to set the base address. Now, every API that you will come in contact with has a base address, and so it's good to go ahead and set it up here so you have your URIs a little bit easier to write. And in our case, for TMDB API, it's api.themoviedb.org/3. Now, if this ever changes, I would come back and change this in one spot, and all of my endpoints will continue to work. Okay, so I set this base address up, and then I'm going to set up the default request headers, and this is where I pass in that key that we have here. Equals new, and we're using a bearer token. We pass in our key. All right. So it's pretty much that easy to get this authentication to work. And then this is telling it where to go to. And then each endpoint that we have discover, we'll have a get genres, we'll have a search movies. All of these are tacked to the end of this string right here automatically. They're just tacked to the end. All right. If we have an error, we could write something to the console log. In a production environment, we might have a logging system that we'd write to. So I think that's it. Something like that. Whatever we want this to say, it doesn't really matter. It says, hey, we didn't find a key. Okay, so this is the startup of our service here. So our service will start up here, and then we need to implement our get random movie here, which is what we're getting ready to do. Now, the other thing I like to do here, and people can debate this all they want because it does take up space, but if I hit // this will give me comments here so that when I call this method from another piece of code, these comments would show up. So when we get IntelliSense, we'll get more descriptive about this, but it does tend to make these service methods kind of chunky with all these comments. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do. Okay. But that's what I like to do. And that's what we're going to do so we can have this described if you're reviewing this code. All right. So what I want to do next is actually start our call here. And we do know that we're going to have a year start and a year end. And if we look at this movie API here, you can see here, I've got these primary release year, and then I've got these dates. GTE stands for greater than, and then this is less than. That's what the LTE stands for. So if I pass it 2 years, it's going to be greater than this date or less than this date. Okay. Also, I can pass in genres and stuff like that as well to this. I just want to look for genres. It's somewhere down here with genres. Okay. So we'll support those 3 things here. Now, what you could do is you can come in here and really dial this in. You could say, I want to look at just Netflix movies or just Prime Video, and you can look at watch providers here. You could look at origin country and origin language. We're going to default ours to the US, but let's say you're watching this and you're in Korea. You can set this to Korea if you want to. You could serve up with cast and get the ID for, say, like Kevin Bacon movies, and you just want Kevin Bacon movies, and that's poster for all Kevin Bacon movies, you could do that. And so there's a lot that you can do. And this is why we're using this particular endpoint here, because it has more, it has advanced filtering to come back. All right. There's a lot to it. All right. So let's get back to coding here. So I just wanted to show you that this doesn't come from random, it is coming strictly from the API. And so this is going to get a random movie. Now to do this is going to be a little bit of logic, but we'll get there. So string, and I'm going to get the release date. And I'm going to call it GTE. And I'm going to just set it to empty string, and then I'm going to get the release date LTE and set that to empty string. Right. So greater than, less than, and we've got to validate these to make sure that we don't have these 2 years that are kind of weird, okay? Because we get weird results from it. In other words, if we have a less than 2000, greater than 2025, what do we do? Okay, so maybe that'll work. Maybe it'll get 1990, 2000, and then greater than 2025. But I'm going to make sure that these are contiguous years when we do this, okay? But you could leave out a decade too. So if you wanted to work on that, we'll see. So we're going to first create our base URL. And this is how we call this. Get set up here, base URL. And you can see here, it knows about ChatGPT, or Copilot knows about it. You can see here, here's the base address here. We set this up here, so we don't need this in our URL. We just need this portion of it, okay? And so that's why we set that base URL. So this is the discover endpoint, and then the movie, and then any type of parameters that we want to pass to this endpoint that we want to do that now. So we can say include adult. And I will show you one thing before I type all these in. If you want to see how the endpoint's called, you can come over to their documentation, and you can see this right here. They've got all of this pushed out here for you. And if you put values in here, it'll create the proper URL for you. So I've already done that, and I know kind of what this URL is going to be. All right, so include adult, and we're going to say equal false. And then every parameter that's inside of any kind of HTTP endpoint is separated by the ampersand. So that's over your 7 key, shift 7. And we'll say include video. We're not going to include video. We're going to say false. And we have some other ones that we want to do. We're going to set up where we want these movies to come from. And so in our case here, region. Now, what I will say, if you wanted this to be variable by region, you would make this a variable. I'm hard coding it, but you could make this a variable where people could select a region they want to in their settings. Okay, so we're going to do the base level settings. If you need more settings, you can enhance this to the cows come home. And with origin, you got to spell them right. Origin, country. Equals US. Now I'll scroll over and see some more here. So I'm just filtering out what I want this to be the base set up with. And with original language equals English. The reason we did this is sometimes we would get weird responses when we were testing this, and we would still get movies that we had no idea what it was, never heard of it because it was from China or some other country. So it wasn't very fun to play when you never heard of the movie ever. We're going to sort these by default by vote count. Vote count. Unfortunately, there's no IntelliSense here, so you just have to get this right. Or you can pop in all the values over there and it'll bring it in. Okay. And then here is vote count.dsc. And then we'll do the last one, which is vote. And this is what this is from our testing. So vote count greater than 200. All right. So if anything goes wrong, we'll come back and have to look at these. So we have to pay attention to the details here. But I think that's okay. All right. So this is our base URL that we're going to use for all of our calls. All right. Now let's scroll over back here, get this back where we can see it. We're missing a bracket in here. All right, so we got a base URL, and then I'm going to create a random movie equals new. So this is a blank random movie. We need this. So when we call this API endpoint, it will push it into this object here. And this is what our app understands as the object. So we need to get it into our movie class, our model. All right. And we're going to get the API to fill it up for us. Okay. So let's check to see if they've sent us a year start. So we can say if year is not null. I like using this better. It's more readable, but you can do it however you want. All right. And I'm going to have contiguous decades here. I don't know if that's a good or bad, but that's the way I did it. I'm going to do this in 2 steps. I think that's a little magic. I could do this in 1, but so all I'm doing here is saying, hey, when the year starts, look in the January of that year, and the year end, look at the end of the year for that. So this, if we put in 2000 to 2025, we would get up to December 31st, 2025, and this would start in 2000, January 1st. So it'd get the whole year. Okay. And so what we can do here is now add these two to our base URL. And so I'm going to say base URL. And we're going to add these in. So you can see here, this is a plus equals. So it's adding to this string that we already created, tacking it onto the end. And we have to put an @ sign between each one. And then we're putting in our conditional variables in there, base URL. If this doesn't get added, or like these are null, this means these don't get added to this base URL, and it'll just return all movies, so which is fine. Okay. All right. So this should work. We'll have to troubleshoot it, trouble check it. Okay. Let's do the same thing for our genres check, even though we're not going to do genres until later on. Okay. But the same kind of thing we'll add in with genres, else it's going to get all the other genres. Once we do settings, we'll come back and take advantage of this. All right, so that's setting up our call, our discover URL. So that's our whole URL. Now we need to call it, but we need a random movie. So we can't just take the first one that comes back, because the first one comes back will be the same every time. All right, so we're going to limit the search for random movies to the first 20 pages. So if you notice here, when I went back over here, you can see here, this is page 1. And you can see here, this movie is in here, and there's several movies in here. probably 20 or so, maybe 10. I'm not sure what's on each page. We can come to count it, but there's several movies in here. So what we want to do is get 20 pages, pick a random page out of the 20, and then pick a random movie off of that page to make it as random as possible. So let's do that. So we're going to limit the search to the first 20 pages. And so I'm going to create a variable called random page. And we're going to use our random variable generator and set a start and an end. Okay, so it's going to be between 1 and 20. Okay, you can also do 21, and this makes this inclusive. So the way random works is it'll start with 1 and it'll go up to, in this case, 20. It's not inclusive of 21. So if you want the full page, you just add 1 to the end here. Okay. So that's just kind of the way this next method works. All right. So we're going to get a random page between 1 and 20. So the 20th page will be included. And then we're going to make a discover URL equals our base URL that we spent constructing here and what page we want. So this will be page between 1 and 20. So this could be 1, this could be 2, it could be 10, it could be 19. And this will pull back a page based on 20, okay? From 1 to 20, but it's random. And then I want to get a random movie from this page. Let's just say get a random movie. All right, so we'll say var, and I'm going to call this initial response. There's a reason that I'm doing this is because I know in testing that not once I started adding genres and years and starts, this would not return 20 pages in some cases. And so we need to like handle that as kind of edge case, and that came from testing. So we're just going to go ahead and do it for right now. All right, so let's get rid of this. And we'll say await, and then we're going to call our HTTP endpoint, and we're going to get from JSON async. And then here, it's going to give us a movie list response. I think so. Let's see what we got here. Okay. Yep, I need to do that. All right, let's go back over here. I forgot one of the models. I should have left that in there, but I didn't. That's okay though. I'll grab it. Let's make one more model here. Let's make one more model. Add new class. And we'll call this movie response. And I'll go here. Get rid of this. I could put this in the same class. I like kind of separating them. But what the reason I'm doing this now is because I'm going to want to look at the total pages here in a second. So like I know that I'm going to need to do that. So what this will do is I'm going to create a class and then I'm going to change all these out here. Well, let me do this real quick. Squares, naming convention. Same thing. Go to results. All right, so now I have this kind of thing here, and I'll show you real quick after we get this typed down. I'll show you kind of what we're doing. So what happens with at the top of this endpoint call, it does return an object here called page. And so we're looking at particular pages, and then the results shows each movie. And then it also says the total pages and the total results. So this would be the total movies in this call and how many total pages there could have been in this call. And this is the current page with its movies in it. All right. So I need this right here because I need to know, we'll see in a second, I need to know what these total pages are. All right. So I've got this movie response here. And so if I go back over to my service, I can, instead of getting movie, I can get movie response. And so now, just finish my call here. It's pretty easy. And what I do here is I need to pass this a URL. So I'll say discover URL, and then I pass it in my JSON option. So now it'll take this JSON response, it'll shove it into movie response. Okay. And if we look at movie response, it also has a list of movies and it'll name everything correctly. Just change the names out for us. Right. So if you've been messing with APIs before and you've had problems with the naming conventions, maybe that teaches you something, or maybe you're an old hat and you're like, I know that, I know how that works. So this will return an object. The object that's going to get is movie response, and this will return JSON and then shove it into one of these, into this right here. And this will be of type movie response, which will include the page number, all of the movies in a list, and then the page count and the total number. Okay. Now we could check this to see, we could check this. Go ahead and say if it's null, we can say throw an exception. We'll do that. It's good to do. We'll say HTTP request error. And we'll say invalid response will be the one we'll use. And you can see these are all built in into .NET, which is kind of cool. And then we just leave our message. Could not find a movie. We'll say random movie. And that means something dramatically went wrong. Okay. Something just went wrong here. Altogether wrong. Okay. So now let's see, we've got that initial response. Okay. What I want to do is I want to check how many pages there were. And if we look at our movie response, this total pages will tell us that. So all we have to do is read that object and look at them. Go back over here, back to my service. And all I have to do, I can say total pages, initial response. Total pages will tell us the total pages. All right. All right. We could also do this. We can say math.min. And this is just because I know about the API, that I do know the max that it could possibly get is 500. So in case this came back as a weird number for some reason, I know that 500 it's in their docs that 500 is the max. So this should never happen, but you never know. So I'm saying like whatever the minimum is. So this has like 672 in it. I know that I can't get that from a call. So it's going to be the min of either 500 or this. All right. And that's our total pages. All right. All right. Now, the next thing we need to do is we've got at this point right here, we have a list of movies. All right. This is called the API, and we have a list of movies unless something went wrong and it throws an error. But if we get to here, this has movies in it. Okay. But what are we looking at? We're looking at posters. So we need to filter out any movies that do not have a poster. Now you notice I write a lot of comments, and some people don't like writing comments. They're saying the code should speak for itself, I guess, but like it does help. I think when you're laying these out the first time is like go through your thoughts and pseudocode this with comments, and then fill in the comments behind until you get a lot better at it. All right. So I'm going to create a filtered movie list, and let's see what Copilot said for me. Initial response. Okay. That's this. Results where. And yeah, that worked. Okay. So string is null entry m.poster path. So this will say, hey, if this is not empty, return a list. I wonder. Okay, this should work fine. All right. All right. I always read those things coming back from Copilot. So, but may not work all the time. A lot of times it doesn't. So I'm going to look at the filtered movies here, and then I'm going to check to see after I filtered them, is the count greater than 0? Now you may be asking yourself, this seems like an awful lot of work. Well, the whole part of this is getting a random movie. All right. And this makes it a little bit more complex than just pulling a movie back from just pulling any movie. We want a random movie. Okay. So if it's greater than 0, and remember, this is the response. And so we have filtered movies, and we have a list of movies in there. And so now I want a random, got a page. I got 20 movies on that page. I want a random movie off this page. All right. So I can't show them all. I need to pick a random one. So I'm going to create a random index here. And I'm going to use my random number generator, and I'm going to go from 0 to the count. Actually, from 1 to the count. And actually from here, I can just do this, and it'll start from the beginning to the end. Okay. So what we're going to do is get a random movie, a random index from this count variable we have here. And then inside of this filtered movies, I want the random index. Now notice here that this is looking at results. Okay, so let's look back at our object here. And notice that I'm looking at results here. So I'm drilled down into this movie response into this variable here and looking at this list of movies. So that I'm just looking at this thing. And a list of movies operates like an array, has an index. And so I can now just get the one from this count here that's on this page and give me a random movie. Okay, so now I have a random movie. If you look at the type here is a movie type here, because this is a list, and this tells me an index, and it pulls back 1. So, and it's the right type that we're looking for. The next thing that we want to do is once I have a random movie,
should be going now. There we go. We're back up again. Sorry, everybody.
All right, we're back.
You're back.
All right, we were almost done with this. I don't know. We had a little bit of internet issues. So like what I've been doing here, I'm just going to go back what I'm doing here and walk back through the code here. We have built this get random movie. Most of it is building out the URL here, but then we got down to the point of like, how do we know what movie we're grabbing? Okay, so we're going to build on a random page between 1 and 20. And then we make our call to our API endpoint, use that URL that we built, and it shoves it into a movie response object. From there, we look at the movie response we got back. We say, all right, how many total pages were in this response? And it'll be a number between 1 and 500. 500 is the max. We know that. That's built into the API docs. And we're going to get the minimum of that number. Okay, so this will tell us the total pages, because once we add genres, or once we add ability to add in year selectors, this pages could drop below 20. If you don't have those limitations, 20 is a pretty good bet, but it could go wrong. All right. The second thing we need to do is filter these movies and make sure that we have a poster in them. And then if the list that we have here has a count greater than 0, which means we have a list of movies that have posters on them, then from here we get a random count off that page of the filtered movies, and then we pick our random index right here. This is our random movie, and then we get a poster. Okay, now we have to append this HTML, this HTTPS endpoint onto our poster path, because what comes back from the API, and I can show that, is just, we can expand this right here. I think we can expand it right. You can see here the poster path is just this string of characters JPEG. So it's not you can't really display that, right? So we need to add in this HTTPS endpoint right here so it knows what to do. The reason TMDB does this is so that they can display the same poster in different sizes. And so we're using the width 500 size. They have a lot of sizes. You can read the documentation, right? So this will return a movie. If we filtered this initial list and there was no posters, or the page we picked was out of range or whatever, this would come back null. So we need to try this again. But instead of just saying, hey, random 20 pages, we're going to look at the total pages in the result, and this will more than likely give us a movie. And so we restrict it to the total pages, get a random retry page out of here. And then we do the same thing. We get a URL, we call it, and then we filter it by the poster path. And then if that's greater than 0, and then we can look at the poster and then the random picture, a random movie, and then return it. So it's the same code in two places, that one's using a different set of pages. In both cases, if we get here and we return a movie out here, this doesn't get executed. And in here, if we return a movie out of here, this exception doesn't get thrown. However, if all of this fails, it just throws an error. So that's our random movie logic. Hopefully that works. Okay. So we can try it out. Now, what we need to do now is actually register this to be called. And so when we're doing C#, we do have to register our services. And so in Program CS is the program that starts up our application, right? And this is where everything happens. And any kind of service that you write has to be rendered in here, okay? So we need to register our service in here. So we're going to add it down here before, where's var app build? There we go, right? So before it gets built here, we're going to add in our service here. So I'm going to say builder dot services. I will have to add that, but we'll do that in a minute. And I'm going to add in an HTTP client, because this is the client that we're using. And then in here, I'm going to add in a DP service. Get rid of that. So it can't find it. We'll say using, and we'll say using. I'm just going to put this in our imports here so it shows up here in here. So this service class will be registered here in the program CS. It should find it here. Just add it. All right. Up here too. All right. So this registers this service. And if you look at, and I know it's a lot if you're new to this, what this does is starts this up and it'll create all this HTTP. It'll get the config and pull this thing out of the config, find it, create this URL. And this all happens at startup. And then when we call this method, all of this is reset up for us. So every service that you create has to be created during startup. Okay. And then once it's startup, you have the ability to call it. So this should get rid of this. Just like that. All right. And because we're using HTTP, we have to set it up this way. If you're not using HTTP, you just add the service. So that's pretty easy to do. All right. Here. I don't think we need to do anything else. At least not yet. Okay. So initially, this should run. And so we can come down to our page here. And now we should be able to call it from our page. Okay, because initially it's going to run as a server-side object. And then if we don't get to it today, we'll add in WASM as a second step. There's a lot more to do, but I think we can get it working today just with the server side. And then we'll do other stuff later. Okay. So let's write a method here. I'm just call it new game, private async new task, new game. And this new game is going to get us an image, right? All right, so I can say, let's create a variable of type movie, let's say random movie. And now we're in the client side now, so we're in the page. And now I want to call this service method. So what I have to do for this is inject this into my page here. So at inject. And if I can't see it, I need to add it here. So I should be able to IMDb. Can't see it. I need to add it to my program CS imports. Client services. Let's see here. We have it here. Yep. Okay. There it is. I just didn't see it before. And I can name this whatever I want. Okay, so now it's using the interface here to do it. And this is going to come to our advantage here because once we go to WASM, we'll register a different service when WASM runs using the same interface. And so this code will work in all instances. But for now, this will call our server side because our page will always run server side. So once we have that, come over here to my new game code here. And I can just call my service to get a poster. And hopefully if we can do that, I call that a win today. All right. So let's see if we say random movie equals, call that random movie. All right. And let's go here. And we have right here, when I hit dot, you can see now, I can see what methods I have available to call. And a movie. And I'm going to go ahead and create some state variables up here that we can have the defaults in. All right, so let's create a private int year start. We'll go 1970 or 1970. Have a good chance of maybe getting Star Wars in there. And then private year end. We'll just hard code to 2025 now. We could probably use something like the year, but let's just be safe, and then we'll come back and enhance that later. There we go. All right, so that's going to be our thing here. And then let's go private string. We'll say selected genres. And we're just going to set it to empty at this point. And because it's expecting that. All right, so here it's telling us what we can do. So it's saying, hey, I'm looking at my variables here. So say year start, comma year end, selected genres, which will be empty string for now, which will give us all genres. That should return a random movie. Okay. Now we need to check it. So we'll say, see if random movie dot say greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, okay. I don't know what else. Get rid of this. All right, so our service is going to return a random movie. As long as the ID is greater than 0, we know that it's real. Okay. So now, let's see what we need. Okay. This is not complete at this point. So let's just see if it works. All right. So what I want to do here is I want to come up and where my image is. So I've got this image right here. All right. And I want to create this to come from random movie. This may give me a problem. I don't know. Random movie. Okay. All right, we need to do this differently. Let's make it here. Private. Okay. And then this. So we set it to new and then we hit it here. All right. So now from here, we should be able to get the poster path now. We can see we have our poster path. Boom. Okay. Maybe that will work.
Fingers crossed. Let's see.
Let's run it and see. There's a lot more to do, but we'll see what it does. You got to do it in steps. That was a lot of coding to get the service to work, but I think it'll work. Okay. Doesn't look like it loaded, but you know. All right. We didn't call new game. Sorry. We wrote that in a method. We didn't call it. So, let's do this. Okay. Let's put this in a different method. So I know that there's some other things that can happen. So I'm going to say protected. And these are different methods that we want to run on here. And this will be on after render. So there's several on after render async. I think that's right. Oh, it needs a boolean. Okay. I am going to say if first render, which means the first time this page is loaded, run this code, or if random movie is null, do some stuff, and we're going to try to call await game and reset the game state. Let's reset game state. It just makes the squares. Okay, we're going to do it like this. And then we may have to call this state has changed. All right. So what this will do is after the page renders, it'll try to go to the movie DP API and render new movie. So let's just see if that works. The reason it was black before is we didn't call new game in any scenario. So it didn't have it never called it. So we could set a breakpoint here to see if it works. We'll do that. Okay, so it's stopped here, so it means it called, and so I have this random movie, so we could step over this. And so you can see now this is blank, there's nothing in it, and so we're going to try to call our endpoint. Let's see what happens. And boom. See if we have a movie. Twilight. Yeah, when Bella Swan moves to a small town. Look at that. All right.
What a terrible first movie to pull back first time. Yeah. Sorry, no offense to the Twilight fans. But...
Come on, Kevin. You're not a Twilight fan?
No. Do they have a name? Are they Twilights? What are they called? Anybody know Twilight fans are called?
I don't know what they're called.
A genre name?
You can see here. There we go. Those people look so young in that movie.
So
no, a funny joke is,
will it pull another one then? Is that the...
If we refresh it, it should pull a different one. Let's refresh it. And we'll step over it and look at it. And this time it pulled Mad Max Fury Road.
Way better movie. Night and day better. One of the best movies on the planet, I think.
Great movie. Now, I do notice that I thought a random square is here, but I think we can fix that. So but let's just see if it's working here. Yeah, this is a great movie.
So is the follow-up to Furiosa. So good. I've seen it a bunch of times. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, Furiosa was pretty good. This was better. This is really good. And by the way, the soundtrack's incredible for this if you ever soundtracks. Yeah. So we'll try it one more time. So it's stopped here, and I'm going to take my breakpoint off now because we know that's working. I'm going to do it one more time. So we don't know what it is now. So let's see, Kevin, see if you can guess it. I'm going to guess. We don't have our guessing in.
Yeah, we can't really guess yet, can we? So, what are the X-Men movies? I don't know which one though.
Okay, so we think it's X-Men.
Yeah.
Be kind of cool if we knew, right?
So the mechanic we've got working at the moment is just the reveal part, right? We're just pulling we've got the pulling the movie back, the reveal part. We still need to add the guessing and then all the game logic
hints
part,
and all
right?
that other stuff.
Yeah.
So one thing that's not happening here is when I refresh it, you notice my square is going away.
Okay, so we want
weird. So
we want one square initially revealed, right?
Yeah, so let's see if we could figure that out here. Let's see what's looking on. So here's we reset our game state. Okay, which squares, and then show random square. We're not calling that. Okay, so we could probably change all this up here. So show random square, right? So when it starts up, and let's see here, let's refresh it. I do need to await this. I did that in the middle of a compile, so I'm going to start it again.
I'm pretty sure that one was Last Jedi poster, by the way. Just so.
It was it? Okay.
I don't know.
Yes.
I'm just guessing.
Star Wars.
It looked like it. Might have been.
Yeah. Oh, this is the Great Gatsby.
Yeah, but there you go. It came up with your square now. Look, that's right.
Yeah. So if I guess it in here, I can like.
Right. Our guessing mechanic doesn't work yet, does it? So that's not.
No, we don't have a guess yet. So like,
right.
Let's see, what time is it?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. All right. I think we've got a service method written. We had a little bit of internet in and out, just a couple of things here. So I think we can call it a day. And next Friday, I can come back and like make this box see if your guess is correct. You know, and then we can focus on like.
And there was one mechanic we thought about with this game too, wasn't there? We talked about it last week, but we'll talk about it again real quick. Was when you do guess, like just typing in the name is really difficult. So we implemented like a type ahead so that it pulled back all of your guesses from the database, and then you could guess the movie from the list of real movie names.
Correct title.
Right, and it would be correct. Yeah. Because without that, this game's almost impossible.
It's impossible because you don't know.
Especially for some movie names.
I mean, this is Toy Story, but like
which one?
Yeah, which one, and is it, you know?
And some of them might be Toy Story, the epic saga of Woody or something, right? And it's like you would never guess that.
Yeah, so you don't know the exact name.
Yeah,
and it has to be the exact name because we're looking for an exact match.
Right.
So,
which is a good problem to solve, and I guess we solve that problem next time. I like that.
Yeah, we'll solve it next week. So that's an API endpoint. I'm going to push this to my changes up to GitHub. So, and then I'll be back next Friday, and we'll kind of continue to work on this.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, here. Back to talking head here.
Cool.
Any final questions anybody have, or is anybody left?
No.
Okay. All
right. Yeah, we're back in next Friday, and we'll continue this on, and we'll continue on until we get to the very end, and we have a fully working app with all the cool features in it.
Yeah. All right. See you guys later. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.